The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as 26-year-old Maya clutched the worn leather folder against her chest. Inside were papers that should have been simple: her father's will, property deeds, and bank statements. But nothing had been simple since the day she found Dad collapsed in the barn 6 months ago. Maya's hands shook as she pushed through the heavy oak doors. The courthouse smelled like old books and floor wax, the same smell that used to comfort her when she was little, and Dad would bring her here to pay property taxes. Back then, she'd spin in the wooden chairs while he chatted with the clerks about rainfall and crop prices. Now those same hallways felt cold and unwelcoming. "Miss Rodriguez, the lawyer will see you now." The secretary's voice was kind but distant. Maya followed her down a hallway lined with faded photographs of the county's founding fathers, all serious men in dark suits who probably never worried about losing everything they loved. Attorney Johnson was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who'd known her father for 30 years. He gestured for her to sit in the leather chair across from his massive desk. The same desk where her parents had signed their mortgage 25 years ago, full of dreams about raising cattle and growing old together on their own piece of heaven. "Maya, I've gone through everything twice," Johnson said, spreading papers across his desk like he was dealing cards. "Your father left the ranch to you free and clear. 200 acres, the house, all the equipment. It should be straightforward." Maya felt a flicker of relief. "Should be?" Johnson removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. This was never a good sign. "There's a problem. An old law from 1892, still on the books. Unmarried women cannot inherit property valued over $10,000 in this county." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. "What does that mean?" "It means the property goes to the next male relative unless you're married within 30 days of probate." Johnson's voice was gentle, but the words were sharp as broken glass. "In this case, that would be your Uncle Robert." Maya's stomach dropped. Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother who'd spent years making snide comments about Dad being too soft to run a proper ranch. The same man who'd shown up to the funeral asking pointed questions about water rights and property lines. "But that's insane," Maya said, her voice rising. "This is 2024, not 1892. How can that law still be legal?" Johnson nodded sympathetically. "These old territorial laws slip through the cracks. Most people never encounter them because most inherited properties aren't worth enough to trigger the rule, or the inheritor is already married. Your ranch, with its water rights and prime grazing land, is worth considerably more than the threshold." Maya stared at the papers. 200 acres of rolling hills where she'd learned to ride before she could properly walk. The creek where she and Dad used to catch fireflies on summer evenings. The barn where he'd taught her everything about caring for cattle, fixing equipment, and the patience needed to work the land. "How long do I have?" 28 days now." The clock started ticking when probate opened. Maya walked out of the courthouse in a daze. The town square looked the same as always. Pickup trucks angled around the fountain, old men playing checkers under the gazebo, the diner with its neon sign flickering between Open and Owen. But everything felt different now, like she was seeing it all through glass. She sat in her truck for 20 minutes, just breathing. Through the windshield, she could see the road that led home, the same road she'd driven with Dad 1,000 times. He'd bought that truck when she turned 16, insisting she needed to know how to handle a real vehicle, not some little car that would get stuck in mud or snow. "What am I supposed to do, Dad?" she whispered to the empty cab. The answer came in his voice, the way it always did when she was lost. "Figure it out. Maya, you're stronger than you think." That evening, Maya sat on the porch swing Dad had built when she was 12, watching the cattle graze in the distance. The mountains turned purple in the fading light, and she could almost hear his voice telling her about the weather signs in the clouds. Her phone buzzed. "Uncle Robert." "Maya, honey, I heard about the legal situation." His voice had that fake sympathy she remembered from the funeral. "I know this must be hard for you." "I'm handling it. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. I've been thinking, and maybe this is for the best. You're young. You could start fresh in the city. And frankly, ranching is hard work. Your dad, God rest his soul, he struggled with it himself." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. Dad had never struggled. He'd worked harder than anyone she knew through droughts and storms and market crashes. He'd loved every sunrise and every challenge this land threw at him. "What are you saying, Robert?" "I'm saying I'd be willing to help you transition. Buy you a nice little place in town. Maybe help with college if you want to finish that degree. This old ranch, it needs a man's touch. Needs someone who understands the business side of things. Maya closed her eyes. She could picture Uncle Robert already, probably sitting in his air-conditioned office calculating how much he could get for the water rights alone. I'm not giving up, Robert. Maya, be practical. You can't possibly find someone to marry in 28 days. And even if you could, what kind of marriage would that be? Built on desperation? After she hung up, Maya walked through the house Dad had built with his own hands. Every room held memories. Her mother's garden visible through the kitchen window. The living room where they'd watched old westerns together. The study where Dad kept his ranch journals and taught her about breeding records and feed calculations. In his bedroom, she found the photo album Mom had made before the cancer took her when Maya was 15. Pictures of their wedding day, Maya's first steps in the yard, family barbecues with relatives who lived too far away now. The last photo showed the three of them at Maya's high school graduation. Dad's arm around both his girls, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Maya sat on his bed surrounded by the smell of his cologne and the sound of wind through the cottonwood trees outside his window. 28 days to find someone willing to marry her to save her inheritance. It sounded like the plot of a bad romantic comedy, except nothing about this felt funny. She thought about the men she knew in town. Most were already married or too old or too young. The few single guys her age had made their feelings pretty clear over the years. They were interested in dating the pretty girl from the Rodriguez ranch, but none of them wanted the responsibility that came with actually loving her or this place. Maya pulled out her phone and started making a list. It was a short, depressing list. By midnight, she'd called 3 old friends who were married, 2 who lived in different states, and 1 who'd joined the military. Nobody had any brilliant ideas about how to find a husband in 4 weeks. As she finally turned off the lights and headed to bed, Maya looked out at the land one more time. Tomorrow she'd start asking around town. Someone had to be willing to help her save the only home she'd ever known. Someone had to understand what this place meant. She just had to find him. Maya spent the next morning pacing around her kitchen, drinking her 4th cup of coffee and staring at the list she'd made the night before. 12 names. 12 possible candidates who might maybe potentially be desperate enough to help her. She started with Tommy Chen, who ran the auto repair shop on Main Street. They'd gone to high school together and he'd always been friendly. Maya rehearsed her speech in the truck on the way over. But when she actually stood in his greasy garage, watching him work under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Honda, the words came out all wrong. Tommy, I need to ask you something weird. He slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. Shoot, would you marry me? Tommy dropped the rag. A wrench clattered to the floor. What now? Maya's face burned. It's not what you think. It's a legal thing. I need to be married to keep my dad's ranch, and it would just be on paper. Like a business arrangement? Tommy stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. Not mean laughter, but the kind that meant he thought she was joking. Maya, you're killing me. Is this some kind of bet? When she explained the whole situation, Tommy's expression shifted from amusement to something like pity. Look, I'm flattered, I guess. But I've been seeing Janet Miller for 6 months now. It's getting serious. I can't just marry someone else even on paper. Janet would lose her mind. Maya nodded and backed toward the door. Right, of course. Sorry for asking. Hey, Maya? Tommy called as she reached her truck. Maybe try the hardware store. I heard Kevin Walsh broke up with his girlfriend last week. Kevin Walsh turned out to be a disaster. He listened to her explanation with growing interest, but not the helpful kind. So you'd inherit the whole ranch? 200 acres plus the house? His eyes lit up like slot machine wheels. And we'd live together? No, we wouldn't live together. It would just be a legal arrangement. Kevin leaned back in his chair behind the hardware store counter. Well, that doesn't sound like much fun. What's in it for me? What do you mean? I mean, if I'm taking the risk of marrying you, I should get something out of it. Maybe we split the property 50-50 after the year is up. Maya felt sick. Kevin, it's my father's ranch. My inheritance, but I'd be your husband. Husbands have rights, you know. Maya left without another word. The next 3 stops went badly in different ways. Mike Rodriguez, no relation despite the same last name, was interested until he found out his ex-wife would probably use it against him in their custody battle. David Kim seemed genuinely sympathetic, but explained that he was saving money to bring his elderly parents over from Korea. and couldn't afford any legal complications. And Jake Morrison just laughed and said she should try online dating. By Thursday, Maya had worked through most of her list and was starting to panic. She sat in her truck outside the diner, watching people walk by and wondering if she should just start approaching random strangers. That's when she noticed him. The man was coming out of the feed store, carrying a 50-pound bag of cattle supplement over his shoulder like it weighed nothing. Maya had seen him around town for the past couple of years, always alone, always quiet. He drove an old Ford pickup that had seen better days but was clearly well-maintained. She'd heard people call him Drew, though she'd never spoken to him herself. Drew loaded the feed into his truck bed, next to what looked like fencing supplies and a toolbox. He was probably in his early 30s with dark hair that needed a trim, and the kind of deep tan that came from working outside year-round. There was something careful about the way he moved, like he was thinking through every action. Maya had heard bits and pieces about him from town gossip. He rented the old Miller place on the outskirts, worked odd jobs for different ranchers, kept to himself. Nobody seemed to know much about his background or where he'd come from before arriving in their small Montana town. Before she could talk herself out of it, Maya got out of her truck and walked over. "Excuse me, Drew?" He looked up and Maya was surprised by his eyes. They were green and intelligent and seemed to be studying her face carefully. "Yes?" His voice was quiet, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Not local, that was for sure. I'm Maya Rodriguez. I own the ranch north of town." She gestured vaguely in that direction. "I know who you are." He said it simply, without any of the small-town familiarity she was used to, just a statement of fact. Maya took a deep breath. After a week of rejection and humiliation, she decided to just be direct. "I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound crazy. I need someone to marry me. Not for real," she added quickly when his eyebrows rose slightly. "It's a legal thing. There's an old law that says unmarried women can't inherit property worth more than $10,000. If I don't get married in the next 3 weeks, I lose my dad's ranch to my uncle." Drew set down the bag of supplement and leaned against his truck. "That's an unusual problem. I've asked pretty much every single guy in town. They all said no, or they wanted something I couldn't give them." Maya felt her cheeks heating up again. "I know we don't really know each other, and I know it sounds insane, but it would just be a paper marriage. We could live separately. After a year, when the inheritance is secure, we could get divorced. I wouldn't ask anything from you except to sign the papers." Drew was quiet for so long that Maya started to think he hadn't heard her. He looked out toward the mountains, then back at her face. "What would I need to do?" Maya blinked. "What?" "The marriage. What would I need to do?" "Just show up to the courthouse and sign the papers. Maybe attend a few town events together so people believe it's real. Nothing more than that," Drew nodded slowly. "When?" Maya felt dizzy. "When what?" "When do we need to get married?" "You're saying yes?" "I'm saying yes." Maya stared at him. After days of explanations, rejections, and humiliation, Drew had just agreed to marry her in less than 5 minutes of conversation. "Why?" she asked. Drew shouldered the feed bag again. "You need help." "I don't mind helping. But you don't even know me. I know you loved your father. I know you work hard. I know you take care of your land." He paused. "And I know what it's like to lose something important." There was something in his voice when he said that last part, something that made Maya wonder what Drew had lost. But before she could ask, he was talking again. "I'll need a place to park my trailer, somewhere on your property, so it looks like we're living together. Of course, there's plenty of space, and I'd like to help with ranch work if you'll let me. I'm good with cattle and fencing." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. After a week of men who either laughed at her or tried to take advantage of her desperation, here was someone offering to help with no strings attached. "Drew, I can't pay you much. I'm not asking for payment." They agreed to meet at the courthouse the following Monday morning. As Drew drove away, Maya sat in her truck and cried, not from sadness this time, but from relief. She was going to save the ranch. She just wished she understood why a man she barely knew was willing to help her do it. The courthouse wedding took exactly 12 minutes. Maya wore her best sundress and Drew showed up in clean jeans and a button-down shirt that looked expensive, though she couldn't say why. Judge Martinez, who'd known Maya since she was little, looked confused through the whole ceremony but signed the papers without asking questions. "Well, that's done," Drew said as they walked down the courthouse steps. His tone was matter-of-fact, like they'd just completed a business transaction. "That's done," Maya agreed, though she felt strange calling this quiet man her husband, even if it was just on paper. Drew had moved his travel trailer to a spot behind the main barn the day before. It was a nice trailer, Maya noticed, newer than she'd expected, with solar panels on the roof and what looked like custom modifications. When she'd commented on it, Drew had just shrugged and said he'd been living in it for a couple of years. The first week was awkward. Maya wasn't sure how to act around Drew, and he seemed content to work from sunrise to sunset without much conversation. But she quickly realized that having him there was making a huge difference to the ranch. Drew knew cattle, not just the basics that most ranch hands picked up, but the subtle things that took years to learn. He could spot a sick cow from across a pasture and knew exactly how to coax a stubborn heifer through a gate. When Maya mentioned that one of her bulls seemed listless, Drew spent 20 minutes examining the animal and suggested a specific supplement that Maya had never heard of, but turned out to be exactly what was needed. "Where did you learn so much about cattle?" Maya asked one evening as they sat on her porch, sharing a pizza she'd picked up in town. Drew was quiet for a moment, looking out at the pasture where their cattle grazed in the fading light. "Here and there. You pick things up." It wasn't really an answer, but Maya let it slide. Drew was helping her save everything she cared about. His past was his business, but she couldn't help noticing things, like the way he talked. Drew's voice had an educated quality that didn't match his simple answers. When he forgot to be guarded, usually when he was focused on some ranch problem, longer sentences would slip out. Complete thoughts with vocabulary that suggested he'd had more schooling than the average ranch hand. One morning, Maya found him in the barn reading her father's veterinary manual, not just looking at the pictures, but actually reading through the technical sections about bovine diseases and treatments. "This is interesting," he said, pointing to a chapter about nutrition deficiencies. "Your father made some smart notes in the margins." Maya looked over his shoulder. Dad's handwriting covered the pages, but Drew was pointing to some of the most complex parts. Advanced chemistry stuff that had always made Maya's head spin. "You understand all that?" Drew glanced up at her, and for just a second Maya saw something like panic in his eyes. Then he closed the book. "Some of it. Basic chemistry." But Maya had taken basic chemistry in high school. What Drew was reading wasn't basic anything. There were other small things too. The books in his trailer. She'd glimpsed them through the window one day when she brought him lemonade. Not paperback westerns or car magazines, but thick hardcover books that looked academic. And his hands, though they were calloused now from ranch work, didn't have the deep-etched lines and permanent stains that came from a lifetime of manual labor. The biggest clue came on a Tuesday morning when Maya's tractor broke down in the middle of the south pasture. She was staring at the smoking engine, trying to remember if Dad's old manual was in the barn or the house, when Drew appeared with the toolbox. "Let me take a look." Maya watched him work. Drew didn't poke around randomly like most people would. He systematically checked different components, his movements confident and precise. Within 20 minutes he'd diagnosed the problem, a blocked fuel line, and had the tractor running again. "How did you know how to do that?" Maya asked. Drew wiped his hands on a rag. "Engines are engines. Same principles whether it's a tractor or—" He stopped talking abruptly. "Or what? Or anything else?" Drew packed up his tools quickly. "I should check on the fence in the north pasture." Maya stood there watching him walk away, her mind racing. Drew had been about to say something else. Something about engines that wasn't related to farm equipment. That afternoon, while Drew was working in the far pasture, Maya found herself studying his trailer more carefully. The solar setup was definitely custom work. Expensive panels connected to a battery system that could probably run a small house. The trailer itself had a manufacturer's plate she didn't recognize, but the serial numbers suggested it was worth more than most people's cars. When Drew came back for dinner, Maya had made his favorite, chicken and rice with the green chilies he'd mentioned liking. They'd fallen into a comfortable routine over the past month. Maya would cook and Drew would help clean up. Then they'd sit on the porch and talk about the ranch, the weather, anything except their personal histories. "The fence is fixed," Drew said, settling into the chair that had somehow become his. "But you're going to need new posts along that whole north section before winter. I'll add it to the list." Maya's list of ranch improvements had grown considerably since Drew arrived. Not because he was pushy, but because he had a way of spotting problems before they became disasters. "Drew, can I ask you something?" He tensed slightly. "Sure. Why did you really agree to help me?" Drew was quiet for a long time. Maya was starting to think he wouldn't answer when he finally spoke. "I told you, you needed help. But there had to be other people who needed help. Other women in town with problems? Why me?" Drew looked out toward the mountains. "Maybe because I know what it's like to lose everything that matters to you." Maya felt her heart skip. "What did you lose?" For a moment, she thought he might actually tell her. She could see him wrestling with something, his jaw tight and his hands clenched on the arms of his chair. Then he stood up. "I should get some sleep. Early morning tomorrow." Maya watched him walk across the yard to his trailer, questions burning in her mind. Whatever Drew had lost, it was still hurting him. She could see it in the careful way he held himself, like someone who'd learned not to let his guard down. Over the next 2 weeks, their partnership deepened into something that felt like friendship. Drew started joining Maya for breakfast before they headed out to work. He helped her understand some of the financial records she'd been struggling with. When she mentioned missing her father's stories about the early days of the ranch, Drew listened without trying to fill the silence with empty words. In return, Maya found herself talking more than she had in months, about her fears for the ranch's future, about the loneliness of the past year, about small daily things that didn't matter to anyone else but somehow mattered to Drew. She also found herself watching him. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the way he seemed to know exactly what needed doing before she asked, the way he sometimes stared at the horizon like he was looking for something, or maybe watching for someone. Maya was starting to realize that Drew wasn't just mysterious. He was hiding something. Something big enough that he'd changed his entire life to keep it secret. She was also starting to realize that she cared about him, not just as the man who'd saved her ranch, but as Drew himself. The quiet, careful person who brought her wildflowers from the meadow and fixed broken things without being asked, and listened to her talk about her father without judgment. Maya was falling for her fake husband, and she had no idea who he really was. Maya was mucking out stalls when she heard the unfamiliar car driving up the gravel road to her house. Through the barn window, she watched a black sedan with city plates pull up next to Drew's truck. 2 men in dark suits got out, looking completely out of place against the backdrop of pasture land and mountains. She'd never seen them before, but something about their purposeful stride toward Drew's trailer made her stomach tighten. Maya set down her pitchfork and moved closer to the barn door, staying in the shadows where she could watch but not be seen. Drew emerged from his trailer before the men reached it. Even from a distance, Maya could see the change in his posture. The relaxed confidence she'd grown used to was gone, replaced by rigid tension. "Dr. Blackwood?" the taller man called out. "We need to talk." Maya's breath caught. "Dr. Blackwood?" Drew had never mentioned being a doctor. She crept closer, using the barn wall as cover. "I go by Drew now," her husband said quietly. "And I thought I made it clear that I didn't want to be found." The shorter man stepped forward. "Andrew, your family is worried about you. It's been 3 years. Don't you think it's time to come home?" Andrew. Drew was short for Andrew. Maya pressed herself against the barn wall, her heart pounding. "This is my home now." Drew, Andrew, whatever his name was, replied. "Living in a trailer behind someone else's barn?" The tall man gestured dismissively. "Come on, Andrew. You're Dr. Andrew Blackwood. You graduated top of your class from veterinary school. You had your own practice, your own research facility. You were engaged to Rebecca Morrison, the governor's daughter. You had everything." Maya felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Veterinary school. That explained how he knew so much about cattle, about animal medicine, about all the things that had seemed too advanced for a simple ranch hand. "Had," Andrew said flatly. Past tense. "The accident wasn't your fault," the shorter man said gently. "The investigation cleared you completely. The other driver ran the red light. There was nothing you could have done." Maya saw Andrew's shoulders shake slightly. "I was arguing with her. Rebecca was crying and I was driving too fast because I was angry. If I'd been paying better attention, if I'd seen that truck coming through the intersection, you can't blame yourself forever, can't I?" Andrew's voice was bitter. "Rebecca is dead because of me. Her family lost their daughter because I was too proud to pull over and finish our fight like adults. I was so concerned about being right that I killed the woman I was supposed to marry." Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Andrew, was running from guilt over a car accident that had killed his fiancée. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of punishing himself by giving up everything he'd worked for. Your parents are getting older, Andrew, the tall man continued. Your father's railroad company needs you. The veterinary research you were doing before the accident. It's groundbreaking work. People need what you were developing. Find someone else. There is no one else. You're the only veterinarian who's also got a PhD in biochemistry. The cattle disease you were researching, it's getting worse. Ranchers across the Midwest are losing entire herds. Maya's mind raced. A veterinarian with a PhD in biochemistry. That explained the expensive trailer, the solar setup, the books. The way he could diagnose problems with her cattle that had stumped other vets. Drew wasn't just educated. He was brilliant. I'm done with that life, Andrew said firmly. What about the woman you married? Does she know who you really are? Maya held her breath. Maya doesn't need to know. Our arrangement is temporary. The shorter man laughed, but not kindly. Arrangement? Andrew, we've been watching you for weeks before approaching. That's not an arrangement. You're in love with her. It doesn't matter what I feel, doesn't it? You've been hiding for 3 years, punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. Meanwhile, you could have been saving lives, continuing Rebecca's memory by doing the work she supported. Instead, you're playing house with a stranger. Maya isn't a stranger. There was steel in Andrew's voice now. She's the best person I've ever known. She loved her father enough to marry a complete stranger to save his legacy. She works harder than anyone has a right to, and she's never asked me for anything except help. Don't you dare talk about her like she's some kind of game to me. Maya felt tears burn her eyes. Even while lying about who he was, Drew was defending her. Then tell her the truth, the tall man challenged. If she means so much to you, tell her who you really are. Tell her about your family's money, about your education, about Rebecca. See if she still wants you when she knows you've been lying to her for months. Maya saw Andrew's head drop. She deserves better than someone who destroys everything he touches. You haven't destroyed anything here. From what we can see, you've helped her save her ranch, for now. But I always hurt people eventually. It's better if I leave before that happens. The men talked for a few more minutes, but Maya barely heard them. Her mind was spinning with revelations. Drew was Dr. Andrew Blackwood, son of a railroad family, a brilliant veterinarian and researcher who'd given up everything because he blamed himself for his fiancée's death. When the sedan finally drove away, Maya stayed hidden in the barn for another 20 minutes trying to process what she'd learned. Part of her felt betrayed. He'd been lying to her about who he was from the very beginning. But a bigger part of her understood. Andrew, was running from pain so deep that he'd erased his entire identity to escape it. She finally emerged from the barn to find Andrew standing by the corral, gripping the fence rail so hard his knuckles were white. How long have you been hiding? Maya asked quietly. Andrew spun around, his face going pale when he saw her. Maya, I didn't... How much did you hear? Enough, Dr. Andrew Blackwood. Railroad money. Dead fiancé. 3 years of running. Maya crossed her arms, trying to look angry instead of heartbroken. Did I miss anything important? Andrew closed his eyes. Maya, I can explain. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you married me under false pretenses. I thought I was getting help from a simple ranch hand who needed a place to live. Instead, I got a wealthy doctor who was slumming it for his own personal therapy. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Andrew? She put emphasis on his real name, and he flinched like she'd slapped him. I wanted to tell you. 100 times I almost told you, but you were so grateful for my help. And I knew if you found out who I really was, you'd think I was just another rich guy trying to take advantage of you. So instead you decided to lie to me for months? Andrew ran his hands through his hair. I know how it sounds. I know you have every right to hate me. But Maya, everything I felt for you was real. The way I cared about this ranch, about you, none of that was fake. Maya stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time. The careful way he moved made sense now. It wasn't just caution, it was the behavior of someone carrying enormous guilt. The expensive equipment, the education, the knowledge that seemed too broad for a simple ranch hand, all of it fit together. When were you planning to tell me? She asked. Andrew looked away. I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe I thought I could just be Drew forever and Andrew Blackwood could stay dead. Well, he can't. Those men know where you are now. How long before others come looking? I'll leave tonight. Pack up my trailer and disappear again. You'll be better off without me. Maya felt her heart crack. Just like that? You'll run away again? It's what I do, Maya. I destroy things and then I run. At least this time I can leave before I hurt you worse than I already have. Andrew turned toward his trailer, and Maya knew that if she let him walk away, she'd never see him again. Drew or Andrew or whoever he was, she'd fallen in love with the man who brought her wildflowers and fixed her fences and listened to her talk about her father without judgment. She had to decide, let him run from his past again, or fight for the future they could have together. Stop. Maya's voice cut through the evening air as Andrew loaded the last of his belongings into his trailer. He'd been packing methodically for the past hour, his movements quick and efficient like someone who'd done this before. Maya, please don't make this harder than it already is. Harder for who? For you? Maya walked across the yard, her boots crunching on the gravel. Because from where I'm standing, you're taking the easy way out. Again. Andrew slammed the trailer door shut and turned to face her. Even in the dim light from the porch, Maya could see the pain etched in his features. Easy? You think any of this has been easy? I think running away is a lot easier than staying and dealing with your problems. Maya crossed her arms. You've been running for 3 years, Andrew. How's that working out for you? It kept me from hurting anyone else, did it? Because it seems to me like you're about to hurt me pretty badly by disappearing in the middle of the night. Andrew's jaw tightened. You'll get over it. Will I? Maya stepped closer. Because I don't think you understand what you mean to me. You're not just the man who helped me save my ranch. You're the person who brought me coffee every morning without being asked. You're the one who fixed my father's old tractor not because I paid you, but because you saw it mattered to me. You're the man who sat with me on the porch every night and listened to me talk about Dad without trying to fix my grief or tell me to move on. Andrew looked away. That was Drew. Drew doesn't exist, doesn't he? Because the man I fell in love with wasn't Dr. Andrew Blackwood or some rich railroad heir. He was the quiet guy who left wildflowers on my kitchen table and knew exactly how to gentle a spooked horse. He was the person who saw that I was drowning in loneliness and threw me a lifeline without expecting anything in return. Maya, no, let me finish. Maya felt tears threatening, but pushed through them. You want to know what I think? I think you're not running from guilt about that accident. I think you're running from the possibility that you might be happy again, and you don't think you deserve it. Andrew's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Rebecca is dead because of me. Rebecca is dead because a drunk driver ran a red light. That's what those men said, right? That the investigation cleared you? I was arguing with her. If I hadn't been distracted? If. Maya shook her head. Andrew, I lost my mother to cancer when I was 15. For months afterward, I tortured myself with ifs. If I'd made her go to the doctor sooner when she first felt tired. If I'd been a better daughter, so she wouldn't have stressed about me. If I'd prayed harder or eaten her vegetables without complaining or done 1,000 other things differently. Andrew finally looked at her. It's not the same thing, isn't it? Because my dad, who loved my mother more than his own life, sat me down one day and told me something I'll never forget. He said grief makes us think we're powerful enough to change the past, but the only power we really have is over what we do next. Maya moved closer until she was standing directly in front of him. What are you going to do next, Andrew? Are you going to spend the rest of your life hiding in different towns, helping strangers just enough to feel useful but never enough to feel whole? Or are you going to honor Rebecca's memory by living the life she would have wanted you to have? How can you possibly know what she would have wanted? Because I know what I'd want for someone I loved. Maya's voice softened. If something happened to me tomorrow, would you want to spend the next 50 years punishing yourself? Or would you want to find happiness again? Maybe help other people, maybe even fall in love with someone else who could make you smile the way I hope I do. Andrew's composure finally cracked. Maya watched him struggle against tears, his whole body shaking with the effort of holding them back. I don't know how to stop feeling guilty. You don't have to stop feeling guilty. You just have to stop letting guilt make all your decisions. Maya reached for his hands. Andrew, those men who came here today? They said you were working on research that could save cattle herds across the Midwest. How many ranchers like my dad could you help if you went back to that work? I can't go back to who I was before. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to figure out who you want to be now. Maya squeezed his hands. You could be Dr. Andrew Blackwood, who helps ranchers and researchers solve problems that matter. You could be the man who uses his education and his family's money to make a difference instead of hiding from it. You could be my husband for real, not just on paper. Andrew stared at her. Maya, you married me to save your ranch. This was never supposed to be real. Maybe not, but it is real now, at least for me. The question is whether it's real for you too. Andrew was quiet for a long moment, looking out toward the mountains where the last light of sunset was fading behind the peaks. What if I hurt you? What if I mess this up the way I messed up everything else? What if you don't? Maya challenged. What if we're both brave enough to try? Andrew looked down at their joined hands. I haven't been Andrew Blackwood in 3 years. I don't even know if I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. When Andrew finally met her eyes again, Maya saw something she hadn't seen before. Hope. I love you, he said quietly. I didn't plan to, and I tried not to, but I love you, Maya Rodriguez Blackwood. Maya's heart soared at hearing her married name used for real instead of just as a legal fiction. I love you too, Andrew. All of you. The brilliant doctor and the quiet ranch hand and everything in between. Andrew pulled her into his arms then, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Maya didn't mind. She'd been holding her breath for months anyway, waiting for him to decide whether to stay or go. So what happens now? Andrew asked against her hair. Now we unpack your trailer. Tomorrow we call those men and tell them you're ready to talk about going back to your research, but on your own terms, and we figure out how to build a real marriage instead of a fake one. Andrew pulled back to look at her face. What if people think you only married me for my money once they find out who I really am? Maya laughed. Andrew, I married you when I thought you were a broke ranch hand with a beat-up truck. If anyone thinks I'm a gold digger, they obviously don't know me very well. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same courthouse where they'd had their fake wedding, wearing her mother's wedding dress and carrying wildflowers from their own meadow. This time, when Judge Martinez pronounced them husband and wife, Andrew kissed her like he meant it. The research facility that Andrew built on their property brought jobs to their small town and helped solve cattle diseases across the region. Maya still ran the ranch, but now she had a partner who understood both the land and the science behind caring for it. Some evenings, they still sat on the porch swing, watching their cattle graze in the distance. The difference was that now they sat together, Maya's head on Andrew's shoulder, talking about their plans for tomorrow instead of hiding from their past. Do you ever regret it? Maya asked one night. Giving up the life you had before? Andrew tightened his arms around her. I didn't give up my life. I found it.